Hello and welcome to Indy Talks, the monthly interview show produced by the Hudson Independent newspaper, the most trusted source of news in the river towns. I'm Barrett Seaman. Our guest today, we are honored to have Andrea Stewart-Cousins, soon to be, right, the majority leader of the Senate in the state of New York. In just about every story that's been written about you lately, it's pointed out that you are the first woman, the first African-American woman to lead a New York legislative chamber. And in doing so, you're going to break the old 3 men in a room image of how Albany is run.
That's right.
So other than being an entry in the Guinness World Book of Records, what does that mean to you, to be those things?
Well, it's certainly exciting. It's extremely humbling. It's an honor. When I think of my story and all of the amazing things that have happened on this journey, I really am incredibly grateful. I am, surprised,
right,
because I never really thought of a career in politics growing up. There were certainly no role models that I could look at that looked like me in these kinds of positions. But also, I'm very cognizant of all of those who'd come before me, who had laid the path of opportunity.
right.
And I'm cognizant of, what I have to do in order to make sure that opportunity persists and that, we are not only creating the first, but we do the kind of job that makes sure that we're not the last, that people will continue to, certainly in public service, elect women, and that we continue to break the barriers, because, we hold up half the sky, and here in New York, we certainly do. I think it's about 51% women. So I'm humbled, I'm excited for the future, and certainly grateful for the opportunities that people fought for and created, and really hoping that the legacy that I leave will be one of creating, opportunity and inspiring others.
Right. Women were big winners in the last election here in New York, progressive women in particular. And there's sort of an assumption that their priorities are going to come to the fore. Education reform, gun laws, reproductive rights, immigration reform. So let's pretend that we're trapped in an elevator, and if you've got 2 minutes to give me your priorities of those issues, you personally, as you go into the next legislative session.
Well, all those things that you've mentioned have been priorities of my conference. As you know, I have led the Democrats in the minority, so to speak, for the past 6 years. And we have been very clear about our advocacy on behalf of education and education funding, and not having your education opportunities depend on your zip code. We've certainly, I've been at the forefront of fighting for women's rights and criminal justice reform, environmental protections, voting, voting access, trying to get New York out of having just Tuesday as we don't even have early voting here. So certainly fighting for immigrants, knowing that New York has a proud legacy of being that place where people are welcomed, and New York in itself is an incredibly diverse and strong example of what diversity means and what it can do. Whether it's women's suffrage or labor rights, New York has a great progressive history, and so I have been with my conference very clear on the fact that we need to make sure we continue that progressive legacy. If we were stuck in an elevator, I'd say what I said to everybody. I'm not going to say it's going to be this, and this, because I've been around long enough to realize that, it's just very difficult to say this will be first, this will be second, but I can tell you that I am certainly going to move the things that are what we consider to be easy, things that we've been fighting for, many of which you've spoken about, including things like the Child Victims Act. I mean, there's things that we have been advocating for years and years and that have been blocked because of my colleagues across the aisle.
Right.
We will move those things and we will continue to really fight. And obviously, you know, what I always say, just because people want to know that we're fiscally responsible, we understand. I mean, I'm representing Westchester, and I understand how important not only the quality of life is, but the affordability of Westchester County.
I want to get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, you know, and the burden of taxes and so on and so forth. So I think people need to know that, you know, I will continue to work to build the economy, create jobs, and I want it to be a place that, you know, that my kids and their kids can afford, and that you know, I could retire in. I mean, that's what it's about. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm very excited that I have an opportunity to help move in the right direction.
One of the issues you've supported in the past has been same-sex marriage.
That's right.
Is that going to happen now? It seems to be the decks are kind of cleared to get that passed.
Well, it did pass.
Oh, it did pass.
Oh, yeah, we passed marriage.
Whoops.
We passed marriage equality, I think about 2013. So that's,
I'm
that's
behind the 8 ball. Sorry about that.
No, that's cool. It's good, you know. So listen, you're informed in many, many areas. And here's the thing. We always assume that people know what we know. And the fact is that no matter how connected we are to anything and everything, we can't know everything, and we don't. So that's why it's important that there be forums like this and opportunities to you know, tell people what they need to care about, what has happened, and again, continue to let people know that their involvement really makes the difference, because a lot of times government is certainly behind, you know, whatever the popular opinion is, and the fight for marriage equality was one of those things. But of course, once New York did it, then it became, you know, a national event. But you know, and that's why it's so important for New York to lead in many ways, because then other states follow, the nation follows.
Right. There was a recent story in the New York Times that had an anecdote in it about a meeting that you had last year with Governor Cuomo and the Democrats, and you, according to this story, said to the governor, you said, "You look at me, Mr. Governor, but you don't see me. You see my black skin and a woman, but you don't realize I am a suburban legislator." Did that really happen?
You know, as I said, well, it's been reported widely.
Right.
You know, we did have that conversation, yes.
Right. But, so what motivated you to say that? What was he?
Well, as I said, and I've said even in the Times, you know, I don't make a habit of making public the contents of private meetings.
Right.
So I've never really discussed it, but obviously it was in the context of understanding the suburbs, and you know, I thought it was important that I, you know, reiterate the fact that I've always been a suburban legislator, and so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. But the implication of that, though, is that you somehow saw that he was maybe missing the point, that you were not like all those New York City Democrats, many of whom are quite progressive, and a whole new flock of them, that you represented a different kind of constituency, and that would be in play. Is that? I mean, that's
well, again, you're very crafty, because you're trying to.
Well, we did.
You're really good trying to get me to reveal more than I'm. Frankly, again,
Right.
It's important that when we have private meetings, that particular line did emerge. That part of the conversation. It was not the whole conversation, as I continue to say, and it was important to be said in the way I said it, when I said it, in the context that I meant it. So, and you know, frankly, it was interesting, because even, you know, the fact that it keeps appearing, I think really just underscores who I am, and the kind of clarity that I like to bring to whatever the situation is that I am in. And my conference, I think, we will certainly assert, the things that we are concerned about. And, people talk about New York City and upstate. The thing is that I have, going into this session, a historic number of people in any conference, certainly 39. I have 39 members, which is more than my Republican colleagues that have held the majority for the better part of 100 years has ever had. And I will have, talking about historic, I will have 14 women in our conference alone. There are a number of firsts. The first Chinese American, the first South Asian senator, the first Salvadoran senator, the first Iranian senator, 2 Colombian senators for the first time. So I mean, it's a historic group of people, black, white, Latino, Asian, gay, straight, and we are geographically diverse as well. So in order to have this number of people, we've won an unprecedented amount of seats on Long Island. I've got 6 Long Island senators where there used to be 9 Republicans. There are now 3 Republicans on the island and 6 Democrats, and of course in the Hudson Valley and up north. So the idea that there's this big geographical block that everybody's got is not true.
Right.
The fact is that we are geographically diverse as well as ethnically diverse and every other kind of diversity, gender, and so we have already understood how important it is that we represent the state and that we deal with the issues of the state as a conference that knows where we've been, knows where New York State has to go, and we want to be, just positioned to help New Yorkers achieve what we can. So, whatever people think, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised because there's a bunch of thoughtful, talented people who are sitting in the conference who are just there for the right reason, public service.
One of the things that got you to this position was the breakup of the Independent Democratic Caucus.
Yes.
Through the election. That's a big deal, it seems to me. I mean, it sealed the majority, Democratic majority. But some of those senators are still there, including Mr. Felder, I guess. Is there going to be a change in their attitude towards things? What does it mean to have that caucus break up?
Okay, so there was an Independent Democratic Caucus.
Right.
There were 8 people in that conference. And those people, as your viewers probably know, were affiliating principally with Republicans.
Right.
So that no matter how many people came into the Democratic conference, because of their alliance with the Republicans and their being sort of given a vast variety of different resources and so on and so forth, we as Democrats never really were able to assume the majority. So as you said, in the primary season, 6 of now they had already come back though. In April, the governor brokered a deal and the independent Democrats came back, and so they were all part of, we were all together. But we still didn't have enough. We had 31. Simca Felder had never been part of the Independent Democrats. He had always just gone directly to sit with Republicans. So he was an entity unto himself.
And still is, I presume.
He, he's not part of the 39-member conference, whereas the 2 remaining members of the Independent Democrats are, again, they came back in April and they, ran with our conference and never looked back. And so we're all together. So, yeah, Simca Felder continued even after April to be part of the Republican conference. And We're going to be working as our 39-member conference going forward.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the issues that are going to come up, and I think there may be an assumption on the part of many in the state that because the Democrats now control all three branches of government, it's going to be a cakewalk to get all this through. What of those issues do you see as the toughest one to achieve?
Well, it's not that they're okay. Like I said, there's some that we've talked about for a long time, and that even when the independent Democrats were separate from us, and we all understood the importance of protecting, say, reproductive health rights. And when I first started carrying that bill in 2007, I remember the Republicans who were in charge said, "Oh, please, we don't have to codify Roe v. Wade here," which is all we're trying to do.
Right.
Because, again, New York's abortion laws were enacted in 1970, and Roe v. Wade took effect in 1973.
Right.
And in 1970, you actually had 12 Republicans who joined with the majority of Democrats to pass women's reproductive health care. Now, it's under homicide. I mean, it's all kinds of problems with it. But so, the issue of just trying to update our laws so that it matches the federal government was just incredible. It was a roadblock that I never saw coming. That's why I said you never know really what's considered easy. But the reality is that we talked about it. So, I mean, that I expect to be done. I mean, my new senators are certainly progressive, and but then you have other issues that are a little bit new to a conversation in my conference. So, for example, there's a real concern, a real concern about healthcare and healthcare access. I mean, people in America go bankrupt over healthcare. I just heard a story where some philanthropic group paid off, all kinds of millions and millions of dollars to sort of, bail out, people and families from healthcare bills that are devastating. So, and then when you have this behavior on the federal level, and people don't realize that New York, the Republicans, again, not only did, going back to women's health care, not only did I not get one Republican who would actually codify Roe v. Wade, even as we speak, in 2018, the same Republican majority would not codify, would not enact the laws that allowed for the setup of the health care exchanges for the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So the governor actually did that by executive order. So something as basic as that needs to happen in New York State so that we actually have by law this healthcare exchanges. And then the broader question about whether it's single payer, the broader question of that has never been a conversation in the Republican Health Senate.
Right.
We've never had a hearing on it. We've never had a discussion on it. So I think because of the impact of healthcare and the importance of healthcare and the concerns around it, which are certainly valid because of the antagonism apparently to any sort of healthcare access that's affordable from a federal level, that's going to be something that's really going to require a great deal of attention so that we can do that. And of course, we're also worried about, again, the tax situation too.
Yes, I'm
because
going to raise that.
I mean,
that's a particularly big issue here in
It's a huge
Westchester.
issue. Yes, and it's again, it was a target. This is a tax bill
New
that
York, New Jersey,
absolutely,
California,
yes, all the blue states, targeted by the president, and trying to find a way to really, protect the taxpayers in New York State, and like you said, certainly in places like Westchester where there's extraordinarily high tax.
Yeah. How do you do that, though? I mean, they floated the idea of making it a charitable deduction. That didn't seem to fly very far.
Well, the IRS has said no. I mean, there are lawsuits, but I do believe that, that will be an effort that we will have to continue to undertake. I don't have a magic answer for something that has just been this targeted. And again, the IRS has said that what, and I mean, people weren't sure whether that actually would work, but now the IRS says no. And so, I mean, there are experts who are looking into it, and you know, we, with the governor, with my colleague Carl Hastie in the Assembly, or you know, and obviously our taxation and finance people and experts, whatever, you know, trying to figure out what we can do, because it's an issue, and one that unfortunately, you know, is mostly ours and other states like ours that decided that we wanted to vote another way.
Right. Part of that, 2/3 of that property tax bill are schools.
Yeah.
And which makes me wonder whether or not part of the solution would be finding out another way to finance schools. Is that something that?
You know, I've always really, because I just never understood, ever understood why the financing of schools should be kind of the
Burden of property owners.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. To me, we are all invested, or should be all invested, in the education of the next generation and the next generation, because after all, we're going to depend on them.
Yeah.
And we are the richest nation in the world. And we are a nation that people look up to for so many reasons. So I never understood why. And the reality of this tax shift invites the inquiry as to how we actually do begin to finance our schools in a different way, you know, and whether, you know, whether that's more of a broader tax, you know, that will ease some of the local property taxes.
It brings in others
Yeah.
beyond homeowners.
Yes, exactly. So, and you know, the good news, bad news, you know, is that with this terrible thing happening, you know, I think it's a legitimate question as to how are we going to do this going forward, because, you know, at least part of the, you know, the ability for homeowners to be able to give so much in terms of their taxes to the school district was at least the deductibility of that. So if that goes away, you know, it's not a good.
Deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, it's not. There's no.
Right.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right.
Are there other states that do it better that you've looked at, or that some of your colleagues have looked at?
Well, we're beginning to look at it. I couldn't tell you that there's any that pop out, but again, we have a new responsibility now. Being in the majority allows for access to resources to do the kinds of inquiry and investigations and create the kinds of partnerships that we had not been able to do in the minority. And as I said, how the school formula was done, you know, for the longest time, you know, the formula was a political formula. You know, who needs it, who's in charge, you know, who needs to bring this, I mean, and like I said, one of the things that I will say about former Governor Elliott Spitzer is that when he ran and won, he actually came in with a formula. Now, nobody says that this formula is perfect by any means, but you know, at least it was something. You know, this is what you look at. This is what you look at. This is what you look at. This is the foundation aid, and so on and so forth. So we've been struggling to get that right, and because New York is so unique with such a disparate opportunity to finance, you know, education, you know, it's almost not easily compared to a lot of other states. But again, you know, this is a important. It's an important problem to address, because you know, there are basics. There are basics that all of us need, and all of us, I think, in America and certainly in New York, want, and that's housing, healthcare, you know, access to opportunity, you know, clean environment, education. You know, I mean, these are basic things, you know, that I think we have to find ways to make sure. As I started with the beginning, that you know, paths have been paved for us, and I don't see any way that we go back on the promise of securing some of these really basic necessities that only we, frankly, have the ability to really do right.
Right. I was surprised looking at your resume to see that your advanced degree is in teaching business administration, and that you spent, what, 13 years
With the
in
phone
sales
company.
at the phone,
Yes,
with the
yes,
phone
yes,
company.
yes.
So what does that bring to
Well,
how does that inform your political?
Well, that was the whole thing. Well, actually, it was, I left in sales, but I started in customer service in the phone company. I started at a place where, all women started back then. When you went into the phone company, you were either an operator
Right.
or you were in the business office. I was in the business office. It wasn't until the consent decree with the Bell system that I was allowed to be promoted into sales and marketing. So, and after that, I did journalism for a while, and
Who did you write for?
I wrote for Gannett. and then because I had, a growing family, my husband, 3 kids, my life went to teaching in really order to facilitate, my kids' schedules and so on. And then I went back to school for my teaching, and yes, it was business education because I thought it would that was my background, and I, thought teaching older kids would be easier. So, that's how I got into this, and I guess we'll end it at that. I was helping my friend who was running for office, and the reason why I was asked to help her, she was running to be the first African-American city council person in Yonkers, and the reason why they asked me to help her is because I had the sales and the marketing and the communication and the teaching and so on and so forth, and they thought it would be good. So I helped her with policy, and I helped her with her press and so on. And then when she got elected, I helped when she ran in the primary and won, I was able to help the would-be mayor, Mayor Zaleski, and brought my skills there. And that's when he tapped me to become his director of community affairs. And that's when, because all of these things that I was doing were really circumstantial things. I loved teaching, but I wasn't planning to teach because I really liked writing and I loved the journalism, but because of the hours and the family and so on. So when I got into public service, that's where all of these skills that I had developed from these various careers really somehow came together, and it's allowed me really to, I think, be successful in my political life as well as be effective.
Right. If we have time, we don't have much time, but before we started, we were talking about your scarves, which have become kind of a branding thing for Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Do you have a particular style of scarf?
No, we're just and it goes back to my friend who I helped. She did become the first African American woman elected in Yonkers, and I became the second African American woman elected in Yonkers. And because people sometimes confuse the two of us, I decided that I would wear a scarf in order to make it easier to identify.
Your distinguishing characteristic.
It is what
and it's stuck.
It's stuck. Happily.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been fascinating, and good luck up there.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. And again, Happy New Year to all of your audience.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you.